All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are tackling histrionic personality disorder, or HPD, and we're going to look at it through this really fascinating new lens, a framework that sees the psyche not just as, a mind, but as a kind of self-powering engine, an engine that, in some cases, can get wired completely backward.
So, let me ask you this. If no one is watching, do you still exist? Now, I know, that sounds like a question you'd debate late at night in a dorm room, right? But for someone with HPD, this isn't just philosophy. It's a real, terrifying, literal question that sits at the absolute core of their being. And honestly, it's the key to understanding everything we're about to talk about.
Okay, so to really get what goes wrong with this wiring, we first need a blueprint for what right looks like. Let's create a baseline. And for a model of a healthy self, we're going to use this symbol, the Ouroboros. You know the one, that ancient image of a serpent eating its own tail. It's the perfect metaphor for a self-contained, self-sustaining system.
So here's the crucial idea. A healthy personality, it has an internal core. It's solid. It takes in the world, all the experiences, and it processes them. And that whole process actually strengthens the self. It exists and it has weight, It has its own gravity, whether anyone's looking at it or not.
And this is what that healthy loop looks like in action. It's pretty straightforward, right? Step 1, you encounter reality, an input. Step 2, you process it using your own internal values. Step 3, you act based on that. And then, step 4, and this is key, you take the feedback from that action and integrate it, refining who you are. Every single cycle strengthens that internal core. It's this stable, self-reinforcing loop of growth.
But what happens when this system breaks? Well, with HPD, this entire healthy loop gets turned completely inside out. It gets inverted. The serpent, it stops feeding on reality. Instead, it starts trying to feed on its own reflection, a reflection it can only see in the eyes of other people.
And here it is, the fundamental reversal. The system is no longer self-sustaining, not even close. It becomes completely dependent on an external fuel source, attention, just to create this temporary, ghost-like hallucination of being real. The self becomes a mirror, not a generator.
This Latin phrase, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived. It sums up the whole terrifying reality of this. For a person with HPD, being unobserved isn't just lonely, it's a kind of non-existence. The internal world just goes dark the second that external spotlight clicks off.
And you can see that inverted process right here. Look at this. Notice how it starts with an output, a performance. They have to act first to try and get a reaction. That reaction, that attention, then becomes the input. And that input temporarily creates a fleeting sense of self that vanishes almost instantly, forcing the whole cycle to start all over again. Can you imagine how utterly exhausting that must be?
This really makes the contrast crystal clear, doesn't it? The healthy system built something real, something permanent, like a house made of brick. The histrionic system? It's just running on a treadmill, endlessly chasing something that's not even there, something completely external and fleeting.
So, what does it actually feel like to live inside this inverted system? What are the real-world consequences of having this void where a stable core is supposed to be? Well, that's exactly where all the dramatic behavior comes from.
I absolutely love this analogy. Think about the behavior not just as manipulation, but as a kind of sonar. It's like a bat in a completely dark cave. They're sending out these loud pings, the drama, the seductive behavior, the manufactured crises, just to see if an echo comes back. Because that echo of attention, that's the only proof they have that they exist at all. Here's another way to think about it, through the lens of thermodynamics. The HBD system is thermodynamically broken. It cannot generate its own emotional heat. So what does it do? It has to create chaos and drama to force other people to give up their emotional heat, their attention, their comfort, their concern, just to warm them up. But, and here's the tragic part, it has zero thermal mass. It can't store any of that heat.
And this rapid cooling effect explains so much. Boredom isn't just boring. For them, it feels like freezing to death. Love that isn't being actively demonstrated right this second feels like it has vanished completely. The system has to be constantly, desperately reheated with new drama. It's a total failure of what psychologists call object constancy.
Now, this internal void, it doesn't just mess with emotions. It fundamentally changes how the mind processes reality itself. The world is seen through a totally different kind of lens, almost like it's in soft focus.
This concept here is absolutely crucial. It's not just about being emotional. This is a specific cognitive style, where the brain actively blurs out hard, inconvenient facts. And you have to ask, why would it do that? Well, because facts are rigid, they're solid. But feelings? Feelings are flexible. And if your entire reality needs to shift from moment to moment to get attention, you can't be tied down by boring old details.
And that cognitive style, it ends up locking relationships into just a few very rigid roles. The person with HPD has to be either the star with an admiring audience, or they have to be the victim with a rescuer. Being seen as anything else, especially just an equal, feels like being ignored. And we already know what being ignored feels like to them: non-existence. The ultimate terror.
You know, the weather vane is the perfect image for this. With no internal motor, no internal core to guide them, their entire identity, their mood, their opinions, the whole shebang, it just points in whatever direction the social wind happens to be blowing. Their center of control is completely 100% external.
So, with all this, is there a way out? Is there a way to escape this frantic, exhausting loop? The answer is yes. But it's not about just managing symptoms. No, this is about a deep, fundamental reconstruction of the self. It's about teaching that serpent how to finally feed itself.
And the goal of therapy is, well, it's profound. It's not just to make the person less dramatic. It's to help them build that missing internal core from scratch. It's about teaching them to grow their own scales, generate their own heat, and find their own damn gravity.
So how do you do that? Well, one key technique is for the therapist to act as a cognitive brake. Imagine this runaway train of impressionistic feeling. The therapist steps in and stops it by insisting on the facts. Who exactly said what? What was the precise sequence of events? This forces the brain to engage with concrete reality, and it starts to build that cognitive muscle that's been missing. And all of this leads to the ultimate goal, what we're calling the radiant chomp. This is that critical, game-changing moment. It's when the person finally learns to take an internal feeling, an emotion, a sensation, and instead of immediately spitting it out to get a reaction, they hold it, they digest it, and they turn it into part of their own core.
This is how it's done in practice. The therapist helps the person build an internal container for their emotions. When a feeling comes up, the instruction is simple but incredibly hard. Stop. Don't show me. Keep it inside. What this does is it blocks that external output valve, that escape hatch of performance, and that contained energy, it's forced to circulate internally. And that generates internal heat, internal pressure, which is the actual feeling of having a solid self.
So really, the entire journey of healing is about taking that broken, inverted loop and turning it right side out again. It's the inversion of the inversion. It's about moving the center of gravity from the audience back into the self. It's the difference between being a mirror, which is totally useless in the dark, and becoming a star that generates its own light.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty provocative question for our own lives, doesn't it? I mean, HPD might be a clinical condition, but this pressure to perform for validation, it exists for all of us now. In a world that's literally built on likes and shares and external metrics of worth, where do you draw the line between performing and simply being?